Well, according to a recent World Health Organization report, more than 12 million girls give birth in developing countries each year, and 800,000 of these girls are under the age of 15 in South Africa. A report by the Gauteng Department of Health says more than 23,000 girls under the age of 18 gave birth in 2020 and 2021. Now, let's discuss this further. We're now joined via Zoom by Lumka Oliphant, Department of Social Development spokesperson, and we're also joined by Bongani Luvalo, is the founder of the Cool Dads Foundation. Thank you so much to you both. Perhaps let me start with you, Lumka. When you just hear those stats, of course we are talking about Child Protection Week, but the core focus this year being on these teenage pregnancies, I'd like to say teenage rapes, because how can we even justify a child as young as 10 being pregnant in this country? But when you look at these statistics that we've just recently read out, would you say that as a country we are faring poorly in protecting our children?
Good afternoon, Unati, and also to the viewers of SABC. Unati, the reason that we make sure that we have such campaigns is to make sure that people are aware of the children's rights. We also make sure that services to children are then dispatched to them. Unati, I liked the lady whom you spoke to just now, who was saying that we need to be united when we speak about the issues of children. Children are not protected when they are out of school. We have seen that during COVID, and the statistics that you gave us, that in 2020 there were quite a high number of children who were pregnant, and this was due to the fact that we had a lockdown, and that means then keeping our children in school. It means that basic education as a child protection tool is working, and therefore we need to make sure that we have our children back in school all the time. Yes, it is concerning for us as a Department of Social Development that the numbers keep rising. It means that communities and families need to come to the party in order for us to respect children and to protect them.
Bongani, sorry, let me bring you into this conversation. Of course, you spend a lot of time, talking about the role of the father in, protecting children, but more importantly, being there for children. When we start to begin to look at just what is happening in this country around the protection of children, or the lack thereof, what role do you think then it is essential for a parent, more especially a father, to be playing in today's times in this country?
Thank you very much, Sunati and Sis Lumka and the viewers at home. I think it's critical for parents, whether it be a mother or a father, to be present in their children's lives, to ensure that we protect our children, we understand what is happening in their lives, but most importantly, on a day-to-day basis, we are able to detect what is happening in our children's lives. Because once you are absent, you then don't know what is going to happen at your child's life, what happens at school. Kids are also, confronted by substance abuse at schools, alcohol, drugs, but also some of the pregnancy issues or sexual interactions. They learn it in those environments. I think in Gauteng we've got the highest statistics, not only now during COVID, but for the longest of time. We've been having children who are you've got kids who are being pregnant at a very young age. And I think in one of the sister radio stations, we were having a conversation where a father says, I want to go and report, my child is underage, she's pregnant, she's only 14 years of age. But the conversation between her mother here in the house and the teachers at school, they don't want me to be the one that lays a charge against, the perpetrator or whoever has impregnated my daughter. So while instruments are there to protect our kids, it's the action that is demanded of us as parents, as fathers, because of the law is there in place, but for it to take action, it needs us as parents to be the ones that actively participate in that space. So if we are going to be sitting back and not taking advantage of this law, then we will now be doing injustice to the good pieces of legislations that we have in this country, and we would make them ineffective. So parents, fathers, while you are absent from your child's life, you are failing to protect your child from what is happening on a day-to-day basis in the spaces that they, are actively participating. They spend 8 to 10 hours at school. So if you are not there to understand how their day was, what did they do, who do they interact with, then your child is vulnerable because of some of the things that are happening in those spaces. They can't seek advice or clarity to understand that if somebody touches me here, if somebody says this to me, if somebody speaks to me in this tone, is this a proper tone to speak to me? So the presence of a father, the presence of a mother is quite important, Sunat.
Lumka, as a Department of Social Development, you obviously work under the very crucial legislative of Children's Act, and that piece of legislature would then propel you, to make sure that some action is taken, as we've just heard now from Bongani, that action is needed, particularly when we do have pieces of legislature that protects these children. I would imagine you work with a number of departments as well as civil organizations. When we look at some of the statistics that were released by the Gauteng Health Department in as far as how many children were impregnated between 2020 and 2021, what action then did you take as a department to ensure that you come in there? Because these children were all under the age of 18, majority of them under the age of 15, as an example.
Bongani, as we have been alluding to the fact that the reporting of any suspected child abuse case is an obligation on all of us. It is an obligation of parents, it is an obligation of educators, and the Department of Basic Education has already made it mandatory for teachers to report teenage pregnancy. It is mandatory for health professionals to make sure that when they confirm a pregnancy, they also report it. I hear that my panelist here says that fathers have a problem when mothers do not want to go and open a case against a perpetrator. As a father, it is an obligation by law that you can go. You don't need permission from anyone. The Departments of Social Development and Health and also other government instruments, we have been in these communities to try and ascertain first who is impregnating our girls. Are they having sex with each other, or is it older people that are impregnating our children? When we were in Lusiki, without any doubt, the children were saying that yes, there are pockets where they are having sex with each other, but there are also older people who prey on children. This is why we were still in that community since February as a Department of Social Development, so that we can be able to get to the bottom of this thing and be able to make sure that all other departments are brought on board. The Child Protection Week is just but 1 week where we highlight these matters, but every single day as a department, we are in communities around the country to make sure that people are aware of children's rights. They're also aware of their responsibilities and what services are there to make sure that there is care and protection. We are saying as well to parents and also to community members, you keeping quiet and not coming to tell us what is happening around your community. We are also with traditional leaders where we work with traditional leaders, because in rural areas, you will know, Unati, firstly, the first point of call will be the traditional house. We are equipping traditional leaders so that they too know that when these cases come to them, they don't discuss it as a family. When it is a child that is pregnant, that becomes statutory rape if it is done by an older person. So this is why we are intensifying this campaign in terms of teenage pregnancy, to make sure that everybody understands their obligations, and that in order for us to be able to arrest anybody, in order for us to bring services, someone has to report this.
Just very quickly, Lumka, while you're still on there, you mentioned, of course, that, Child Protection Week just being one of, those days that we commemorate in this country to just talk about the scourge of what is happening to children. We also have 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children, which is also coming up, looking at the fact that the murder and rape of women and children remains stubbornly high. Just in terms of some of the discussions that we should be having, what are your views in as far as anti-sexual as well as gender violence awareness campaigns, like the 16 days of activism as an example, those conversations that we should be having?
The conversations that we are having during these campaigns is first are also educational and also for people to understand their obligations. We also make sure that we go to communities, because at times you find that communities also don't understand when we speak them in English. To speak to them in English, it becomes important for us, especially as social development, when we do our community mobilization. We go into communities to make sure that people interpret the law the way it should. I mentioned that before we started this campaign, we were in Lusikisiki with the communities in Lusikisiki. We've chosen Lusikisiki because it is one of the districts that keep coming up in police statistics, in teenage pregnancy police statistics as being high. So once we have these things and we see what the problems are, we go into communities and be able to teach people and be able to educate them. So these campaigns are very important for government and also South Africans. South Africans, as we know, that have a right to get information. So as well as the Department of Social Development, when we speak to children, we have to make sure that they participate in these campaigns. Therefore, when we say to you that we have these campaigns every single day, it is because we want to make sure that if there are policy changes that need to be made, we do that. We make sure that people are with us as partners, especially families, because children come from families.
All right, Lumka, let me bring in Bongani as we wrap our conversation very quickly. Bongani, you have just recently written a memoir. As we begin to talk about the role of men in some of these conversations, in some of these campaigns, in your writing of this memoir, you obviously spoke to several men just about their take on certain issues that affect society today. Just one or two key pointers that came out of your discussions.
I think the most important 2 points, one is the absence of a father and the presence of a father, both physically and emotionally, and the impact that has in a child as they grow up and how that impacts them in participating or engaging with other human beings as they grow as children, and how they become grown men who then start their own families and become fathers to their own kids. And for us, it's a starting point for us to engage further, to say, where do some of these societal problems start from, and how best do we ensure that we close the gap? Because the intention of this book is to say, as society, we need to understand the trajectory of an absent father in a community, in a child's life, and how that impacts a child. We are releasing the book on the 19th of June on Father's Day. It will be available on different stores, but also people can engage with us on our Cool Dads page on Facebook and other social media platforms. But it's quite an interesting finding that we have gathered and put together in this book, and we're hoping that we can be able to have dialogues in different communities, and hopefully I'll engage Mrs. Lumka as well and see how best to ensure that we speak to the boy child and the girl child, but also the certain communities that she's engaging, like in Lusikisiki. I understand some of the problems that are in Lusikisiki that have got to do with tradition and culture, because we've been also to those kind of communities where people are, held back by culture and tradition and some of the customs that are in those communities.
Bongani Luvalo is the founder of the Cool Dads Foundation, and I was also joined by Lumka Oliphant, Department of Social Development spokesperson. Thank you to you both for this conversation.